The first starship of the Zorn Collective emerged from quantum space like a nightmare made real. Kilometers long and bristling with weaponry that defied human understanding, it hung above Earth's orbital defenses with a stillness that spoke of absolute confidence. No warning preceded its arrival. No diplomatic channels opened. Just a sudden, terrifying presence that obliterated entire defense platforms with casual precision. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from an emergency monitoring station, her hands clenched into fists, knuckles white against the reinforced glass of the observation deck. The massive holographic displays flickered with dying communication signals, each vanishing point of light representing hundreds, sometimes thousands of human lives. Outside, the void of space transformed into a canvas of destruction. The orbital defense network had been humanity's pride. A complex system of interconnected satellites, automated defense platforms, and strategic monitoring stations that had protected Earth for decades. Now those same platforms crumbled like paper against the alien vessel's impossible weaponry. Energy signatures unlike anything in human scientific records, carved through steel and ceramic, through advanced shielding and reinforced hull plating. Quantum disruption detected, muttered a technician seated nearby, his voice a mixture of professional calm and barely contained terror. Their weapon systems are operating on principles we've never even theorized. Elena knew the data streams told a horrifying story. The Zorn ship wasn't just destroying human infrastructure, it was systematically dismantling every defensive layer with surgical precision. Each strike seemed calculated to maximize psychological impact as much as physical destruction. First, communication networks. Then orbital defenses. Next would come ground-based installations. Backup systems initiated across multiple continents, but Elena recognized the futility. Whatever technology the Zorn possessed transcended current human understanding. Their quantum-based weaponry seemed to predict and neutralize defensive responses before those responses could even be fully conceived. A sudden explosion near the monitoring station's left display caught her attention. Another orbital platform, this one housing over 3,000 personnel, disappeared in a silent bloom of electromagnetic destruction. No escape pods, no survivors, just instantaneous elimination. Full planetary defense protocols, Elena commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos. Activate emergency relocation sequences for all major population centers. The technicians moved with practiced efficiency, though their movements carried an undercurrent of barely contained panic. Massive underground shelters, designed as humanity's last refuge, would now face their first true test. Cities would be evacuated, populations redistributed to minimize potential losses. Outside the station's protective shielding, more Zorn vessels began to materialize. They moved with a synchronized precision that suggested a collective intelligence far beyond individual ship operations. Each vessel looked like a perfect geometric shape, impossible angles and surfaces that seemed to shift and reconfigure even as they maintained a core structural integrity. Elena's secondary display showed global response teams mobilizing. Military installations across 6 continents were going into high alert status. Experimental defense technologies, kept secret for decades, would now be deployed. Prototype energy weapons, quantum interference generators, experimental propulsion systems that had been theoretical research projects mere weeks ago. But against the Zorn Collective, would any of it matter? The ship's communication systems crackled. For a brief moment, a series of strange mathematical sequences appeared, a language of pure information that no human translator could immediately comprehend. It felt like a message, a statement of absolute technological superiority. We are here. Resistance is mathematically impossible. Elena watched as another orbital platform disintegrated. Thousands more lives erased in an instant. The silence was perhaps the most terrifying aspect. No explosions, no dramatic fireballs, just precise, clinical elimination. Her research team was already in motion, preparing to be transported to the emergency underground complex in the Andes. Whatever was happening, humanity would not go quietly. They would adapt. They would find a way. Because that's what humans did best. The first wave of the invasion had begun, and despite the overwhelming technological superiority of the Zorn Collective, the real battle was just starting. The underground complex beneath the Andes Mountains was never meant to be humanity's last hope. Designed decades ago as a contingency for global catastrophe, the facility now hummed with an intensity that transformed scientific research into a desperate act of survival. General Marcus Chen stood before a massive holographic display, his weathered hands tracing the rapidly changing global map. Red zones expanded with terrifying speed, representing territories lost to the Zorn invasion. Green zones, safe zones, were shrinking by the hour. Behind him, a diverse team of specialists worked with an urgency that bordered on controlled panic. Dr. Elena Rodriguez moved between workstations, her mind racing faster than her feet. Survivors from every scientific discipline worked shoulder to shoulder, physicists beside engineers, mathematicians alongside programmers. Broken communication devices, fragments of advanced technology, and hastily assembled research equipment created a landscape of organized chaos. "We've lost contact with the Sewell Research Base," announced a communication specialist, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Satellite imagery shows complete electromagnetic devastation." Marcus approached Elena, a data tablet displaying fragmented sensor readings from the initial invasion. "Our conventional understanding of warfare means nothing to them," he said quietly. "They're operating on a level of technological complexity we can barely comprehend." Elena nodded, her fingers already dancing across a quantum analysis terminal. Scattered across the room were survivors, some injured, some shell-shocked, but all united by a singular purpose. Remnants of the world's most advanced research teams, military strategists, and technological innovators had been gathered here, their collective knowledge now humanity's most potent weapon. A young engineer named Sarah approached with a breakthrough. She had been analyzing the electromagnetic signatures from the Zorn vessels, comparing them against theoretical quantum communication models. "Look at this," she said, projecting a complex series of wave patterns. "Their communication network isn't just advanced. It's fundamentally different from anything in our current scientific understanding." The room fell silent. On the massive holographic display, global communication networks pulsed with intermittent signals, the last gasps of human technological infrastructure. Each pulse represented a city, a research base, a military installation fighting to maintain connection. "They're not just attacking," Elena muttered, her eyes tracing the complex wave patterns. "They're systematically dismantling our ability to communicate, to organize, to resist." Marcus leaned in, his military background combining with a deep scientific curiosity. "How do we fight an enemy that can predict and neutralize our responses before we even make them?" The answer would not come easily. Around them, the underground complex represented humanity's most diverse and brilliant collection of minds. Researchers from every continent, every discipline, now worked with a singular focus. No more academic rivalries, no more institutional boundaries. Survival had become the ultimate collaborative project. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Keiko Nakamura, a quantum physicist who had been quietly working in a corner, suddenly called out. "The patterns, they're not just communication signals. They're predictive algorithms." Her discovery sent a wave of excitement through the room. The Zorn's communication network wasn't just a method of transmitting information. It was a living, adaptive system that anticipated and controlled potential outcomes. "If their strength is predictive control," Elena said slowly, her mind racing, "then our advantage must be our ability to be truly unpredictable." The team began to see a glimmer of potential strategy. The Zorn relied on mathematically precise predictions, on absolute control. Humans, by contrast, thrived on innovation, on finding solutions in the spaces between certainty. Marcus brought up historical examples, moments when human creativity had overcome seemingly insurmountable technological barriers. The development of computer technology, the rapid innovation during global conflicts, the unexpected solutions that emerged from crisis. "We don't need to match their technology," he said, his voice gaining strength. "We need to break their understanding of how technology should work." As night fell, though underground, time was marked only by work cycles. The team continued their work. Prototype communication disruptors took shape. Quantum interference models were developed. Each breakthrough, no matter how small, represented a fragment of hope. Humanity was down, but they were not out. The real battle was just beginning. The research laboratory buzzed with an electric intensity that defied the underground complex's sterile environment. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a massive holographic display, her fingers tracing intricate quantum wave patterns that danced like living mathematics. Surrounding her, a team of the world's most brilliant minds worked with a focus born of desperation and hope. Dr. Keiko Nakamura approached, her hands holding a stack of data printouts that represented weeks of intense analysis. "The Zorn communication network is more than just a transmission system," she explained, her voice carrying a mix of scientific excitement and underlying tension. "It's a predictive quantum ecosystem that operates on principles we've only begun to understand." The holographic display shifted, revealing complex intersecting lines of mathematical probability. Each line represented potential communication pathways, decision matrices that seemed to predict outcomes with impossible precision. Normal computational models would require centuries to generate such intricate predictive systems. "They don't just communicate," Elena muttered, studying the patterns. "They anticipate." General Marcus Chen joined them, his military background providing a strategic counterpoint to their scientific exploration. He pointed to a specific node in the quantum network representation. "See how each communication pathway creates multiple potential outcomes. It's like they're playing a multidimensional chess game where they can see every possible move simultaneously." The team had been analyzing captured communication fragments, microscopic data packets retrieved from destroyed human defense platforms. Each fragment was a puzzle piece that revealed more about the Zorn's fundamental approach to information and strategy. Sarah, the young engineer who had first noticed the unique electromagnetic signatures, had been working on a breakthrough approach. She walked up to the holographic display, her fingers manipulating the quantum wave patterns. "Their network assumes perfect information," she explained. "But perfect information is based on existing knowledge. What if we could introduce something completely unexpected?" The concept was radical. The Zorn's quantum communication system relied on predictive algorithms that calculated outcomes based on historical data and mathematical projections. Humans, by contrast, had an ability to generate truly novel solutions, to think outside established parameters. Dr. Robert Martinez, a specialist in complexity theory, began sketching potential intervention strategies. "We can't match their computational power," he said, "but we can introduce controlled chaos. Imagine creating communication signals that don't just disrupt their network, but fundamentally challenge its core operational assumptions." Elena's breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. She had been studying comparative communication systems, not just human and Zorn technologies, but also biological communication networks found in nature. Ant colonies, neural networks, bacterial communication systems. "They operate on certainty," she said suddenly. "We need to operate on possibility." The team gathered around, sensing something significant was emerging. Elena began explaining her theory. The Zorn's quantum network assumed that every potential outcome could be predicted and controlled. But true intelligence, true adaptability, came from the ability to function in uncertainty. Biological systems had evolved complex communication methods that weren't about perfect prediction, but about rapid adaptation. A bee colony didn't predict every possible flower location. It created dynamic, responsive communication that could change instantaneously. "We're not trying to fight their technology," Elena explained, her excitement growing. "We're trying to introduce a completely different paradigm of communication and decision-making." Marcus saw the strategic implication immediately. "You're talking about creating a communication system that doesn't just resist their network, but fundamentally challenges how they understand communication itself. The team worked through the night, developing prototype communication algorithms that behaved more like living systems than traditional computational models. Each algorithm was designed to be inherently unpredictable, to change its own parameters based on minimal input, to generate solutions that defied standard mathematical projections. By dawn, though dawn was a meaningless concept deep underground, they had developed their first experimental communication disruptor. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was an information system designed to introduce fundamental uncertainty into the Zorn's seemingly impenetrable quantum network. Humanity's first true weapon against the invasion was not a missile or a shield. It was an idea. The real battle for survival had just begun. The quantum laboratory hummed with an intensity that felt almost alive. Lines of code scrolled across multiple screens, each display a window into a complex digital ecosystem that defied traditional understanding of computer programming. Dr. Elena Rodriguez leaned forward, her fingers moving with practiced precision across multiple input interfaces. "We're creating something beyond a traditional computer virus," she explained to General Marcus Chen, who watched the process with a mixture of scientific curiosity and strategic intensity. "This is a living algorithm, a digital organism designed to adapt and evolve within the Zorn's communication network." Sarah, the young engineer who had first identified the unique electromagnetic signatures of the Zorn vessels, worked alongside Elena. Their team had spent weeks developing an approach that was part mathematics, part biological mimicry, and part pure innovation. The algorithm they were creating wasn't just a piece of code. It was a potential weapon of unprecedented complexity. On the primary display, complex mathematical patterns danced, wave functions that shifted and transformed with each millisecond. Each line of code was a carefully crafted piece of misdirection, a digital whisper that would grow into a thunderous disruption. "Look at the adaptive response models," Sarah said, pointing to a particularly intricate section of code. "Traditional viruses follow a set pattern. This one learns. It changes. It responds to the environment of the network itself." The concept was revolutionary. Most computer systems were designed with predictable defensive mechanisms, firewalls, encryption, isolation protocols. The Zorn's quantum communication network took this to an extreme. A system so advanced it could predict and neutralize potential threats before they could even fully form. But their strength was also their weakness. Dr. Robert Martinez approached with a tablet displaying comparative analysis. "Their network assumes perfect information," he said, "but perfect information requires a closed system, and no system is truly closed." Elena nodded, her mind racing through potential scenarios. The algorithm they were developing wasn't designed to destroy the Zorn's network. It was designed to confuse it, to introduce fundamental uncertainty into a system that believed uncertainty was impossible. The first test would be small, a single communication node, a microscopic intervention that could potentially create massive systemic disruption. Marcus studied the preliminary simulations. As a military strategist, he understood the profound implications. "This isn't just about breaking their communication," he said quietly. "This is about making them question the very nature of their technological superiority." Hours turned into days. The team worked in shifts, each member bringing a unique perspective. A biologist contributed insights about adaptive communication in natural systems. A mathematician developed probability models that defied traditional computational thinking. A linguist provided insights into communication patterns that went beyond simple information transfer. The algorithm took shape. It was designed to mimic the unpredictability of human thought, capable of making leaps of logic that would be impossible in a purely mathematical system. Each line of code was a potential point of unexpected intervention. "We're not trying to break their network," Elena explained during a team briefing. "We're trying to introduce a fundamental confusion. Imagine a system that suddenly cannot trust its own predictive capabilities." The first test came unexpectedly. A captured communication fragment from a destroyed Zorn scout vessel provided the perfect initial testing ground. Sarah carefully integrated their adaptive algorithm, watching as it began to interact with the alien communication protocols. The results were subtle at first. Microscopic inconsistencies, tiny moments of computational uncertainty. But in a system designed for absolute precision, even the smallest uncertainty could be catastrophic. On the primary display, a single Zorn communication node began to show strange behavioral patterns. Conflicting signals, momentary hesitations, microscopic computational stutters that would be invisible to most observers. But to the team, it was a breakthrough. First successful intervention, Sarah whispered, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and underlying tension. The invisible weapon was more than a piece of code. It was humanity's first true response to the invasion. A ripple that could become a wave. The resistance had become more than just a military strategy. It was a global network of human innovation, each location a unique node in a complex, adaptive system of survival and defiance. In an abandoned university complex in Brazil, a team of engineers worked tirelessly. They had repurposed medical scanning equipment, transforming delicate diagnostic tools into sophisticated communication disruptors. Led by Dr. Maria Santos, a brilliant biomedical engineer, they understood that survival meant reimagining technology at its most fundamental level. Across the world in rural Japan, another group of resistance fighters gathered in a small mountain research station. Here, communication experts and electrical engineers developed quantum signal mimicry technologies using salvaged satellite equipment. Their goal was simple yet revolutionary: create communication signals that could slip through the Zorn's detection systems like whispers through a storm. A makeshift research center in Nairobi became a hub of mathematical innovation. Mathematicians and computer scientists worked on predictive models that could anticipate and counter alien tactical responses. They used everything from ancient mathematical principles to cutting-edge quantum computing theories, creating the approach to problem-solving that was uniquely human. Dr. Elena Rodriguez coordinated these global efforts from the underground Andes complex. Each resistance cell reported through carefully encrypted channels, sharing breakthroughs, comparing notes, exchanging fragments of code and technological insights. "We're not just fighting," Elena explained to General Marcus Chen during a strategy meeting. "We're reimagining the entire concept of technological warfare." The Brazilian team's breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. By studying the Zorn's communication patterns, they discovered a way to create interference signals that mimicked the aliens' own communication protocols. It wasn't about destroying their network. It was about introducing subtle inconsistencies that would grow like a virus. In the Japanese mountain station, the team developed a breakthrough in quantum signal manipulation. They created adaptive communication devices that could change their electromagnetic signature faster than the Zorn's detection systems could track. Each device became a moving target, a digital chameleon that could slip through the most advanced tracking systems. The Nairobi team's predictive models took a different approach. They developed computational algorithms that could generate potential response scenarios at a rate that defied traditional computing limitations. By creating millions of potential tactical responses simultaneously, they made their strategic planning fundamentally unpredictable. Marcus studied the incoming reports with a strategist's eye. These weren't just isolated research efforts. They were creating a global network of resistance that operated more like a living organism than a traditional military response. "The Zorn expect a hierarchical, predictable defense," he noted to Elena. "Instead, we're creating something that doesn't have a single point of control, something that can adapt, change, respond in ways they can't anticipate." Each resistance cell became a node of innovation. A school in Chile converted its computer lab into a communication research center. A small technology institute in India developed new encryption methods that could hide communication signals in the background noise of electromagnetic radiation. A group of retired engineers in Australia created improvised communication devices using parts from everyday electronics. The global resistance was transforming the very concept of technological warfare. No longer was this about matching the Zorn's technological superiority. It was about introducing a fundamental uncertainty that their rigid, predictive systems couldn't comprehend. Elena's team in the Andes complex worked to coordinate these efforts, creating a distributed network of innovation that could share breakthroughs almost instantaneously. Each new discovery was immediately analyzed, tested, and distributed to resistance cells around the world. "We are becoming something new," Elena told Marcus, watching the global communication map that showed resistance cells lighting up like neural connections in a living brain. Not just a military response, but a global intelligence that can adapt faster than any single system can predict. As the Zorn continued their invasion, they remained unaware of the true nature of the resistance forming beneath them. This was more than a fight for survival. It was a reimagining of human potential. The real weapon was not a piece of technology. It was human creativity itself. The first signs of systemic failure appeared almost imperceptibly. A Zorn battleship near Jupiter's orbital range suddenly reported conflicting navigation coordinates. Communication protocols began to generate nonsensical response patterns. What seemed like minor glitches were actually the first visible cracks in a seemingly impenetrable technological fortress. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the initial report stream in, her fingers tracing the complex data patterns on the holographic display. General Marcus Chen stood beside her, his military background providing a strategic counterpoint to her scientific analysis. "It's working," Elena whispered, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and underlying tension. The quantum interference algorithms developed by their global resistance network were doing more than just disrupting communication. They were introducing fundamental uncertainty into the Zorn's hyper-advanced communication ecosystem. Each microscopic intervention created ripple effects that grew exponentially. In the Zorn command structure, something unprecedented began to happen. Their perfectly calibrated decision-making network started experiencing what could only be described as computational hesitation. Battleships received contradictory orders. Defensive formations developed inexplicable gaps. Strategic calculations began to generate outcomes that defied their own predictive models. Dr. Robert Martinez, the complexity theory specialist, explained the phenomenon during a briefing. "Their entire technological system is based on absolute predictability," he said, pointing to a complex series of quantum wave patterns. "But we're introducing something they cannot mathematically account for: genuine uncertainty." The global resistance had transformed their initial defensive strategy into a sophisticated form of technological guerrilla warfare. Each resistance cell contributed unique interventions. The Brazilian team's signal mimicry, the Japanese group's quantum manipulation, the Nairobi mathematicians' unpredictive modeling. Each approach created a different type of computational interference. Marcus studied the strategic implications. "We're not just fighting their technology," he observed. "We're challenging their fundamental understanding of how technology should function." Reports began streaming in from multiple solar system sectors. Zorn communication networks started showing increasingly bizarre behavioral patterns. A battleship near Mars adjusted its trajectory based on mathematical calculations that made no logical sense. A defensive platform in the asteroid belt generated communication signals that seemed to contradict its own operational protocols. The alien leadership, a collective computational intelligence that had never experienced genuine uncertainty, began to show signs of systemic stress. Their perfectly balanced decision-making networks started to generate increasingly erratic responses. Elena's team had created more than a weapon. They had introduced a form of technological cognitive dissonance into the most advanced communication system in known space. "Look at these response patterns," Sarah said, highlighting a section of the holographic display. "Their system is trying to generate predictive models, but the input data is becoming fundamentally unreliable." The Zorn's greatest strength had always been their ability to calculate potential outcomes with impossible precision. Now that strength was becoming their most critical vulnerability. Each attempt to predict and control was meeting resistance from an entirely new form of technological interaction. Dr. Keiko Nakamura, analyzing the quantum interference patterns, made a crucial observation. They're experiencing something similar to how a human mind might experience cognitive overload, she explained. Their systems are designed for perfect information processing, but we're introducing data that cannot be perfectly processed. The resistance was winning not through superior firepower, but by challenging the very fundamental assumptions of technological interaction. Marcus recognized the profound strategic implications. This isn't just about disrupting their communication, he said. We're fundamentally challenging their understanding of how information and decision-making can function. As the systemic disruptions grew, the Zorn leadership began to experience something unprecedented in their collective history: uncertainty, doubt, the realization that their technological superiority might not be absolute. The breaking point was approaching, and humanity had found its most unexpected weapon: the ability to introduce genuine unpredictability into a system that believed unpredictability was impossible. The moment of counterattack arrived like a symphony of controlled chaos. Humanity's resistance had transformed from isolated defensive groups into a single, adaptive organism of technological warfare. General Marcus Chen stood in the underground command center, his hands moving across holographic displays that tracked the global intervention. Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked beside him, her fingers dancing across quantum communication interfaces that defied traditional understanding of technological interaction. "We're not just attacking," Elena explained, her voice calm despite the magnitude of their operation. "We're fundamentally rewriting the rules of engagement." The global resistance cells had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Each group had developed a unique approach to disrupting the Zorn's communication network. The Brazilian team's signal mimicry, the Japanese quantum manipulation experts, the Nairobi mathematical strategists. Now they would strike simultaneously across multiple technological and physical fronts. Their first target was a massive Zorn communication hub orbiting near Venus. The Resistance had discovered that this central node was critical to the alien fleet's coordinated operations, but a direct attack would be suicide. Instead, they would use their most powerful weapon: unpredictability. Quantum interference algorithms developed in the Andes complex began to cascade through the Zorn's communication network. These were not traditional viruses or hacking attempts. They were adaptive information patterns designed to introduce fundamental uncertainty into the most advanced communication system in known space. Sarah, the brilliant young engineer, monitored the initial interventions. "We're not destroying their network," she explained to her team. "We're making it impossible for them to trust their own systems." The attack came from everywhere and nowhere. Satellite communication networks transformed into vectors of technological disruption. Quantum signals generated impossible mathematical sequences. Communication protocols began to generate responses that defied logical interpretation. A Zorn battleship near Mars suddenly received conflicting navigation coordinates. Another defensive platform in the asteroid belt generated communication signals that contradicted its own operational protocols. Strategic calculations began to produce outcomes that made no sense within the aliens' understood mathematical frameworks. Marcus watched the holographic displays light up with intervention points. Each disruption is designed to create exponential uncertainty. He noted, "We're not fighting their technology. We're challenging their fundamental understanding of how technology should function." The Resistance had become something more than a military operation. It was a global intelligence that could adapt faster than any single system could predict. Schools, research centers, retired engineers, everyone had become a potential point of technological intervention. Elena's team had created more than a weapon. They had introduced a form of technological cognitive dissonance into the most advanced communication system in known space. The Zorn leadership, a collective computational intelligence that had never experienced genuine uncertainty, began to show signs of systemic breakdown. Their perfectly balanced decision-making networks started to generate increasingly erratic responses. "Look at these response patterns," Dr. Robert Martinez called out, highlighting a section of the display. "Their system is trying to generate predictive models, but the input data has become fundamentally unreliable." Across multiple solar system sectors, the intervention expanded. Communication networks twisted into impossible configurations. Strategic calculations generated nonsensical outcomes. The Zorn's greatest strength, their ability to predict and control, was becoming their most critical vulnerability. The human resistance was winning not through superior firepower, but by introducing a fundamental challenge to the aliens' technological worldview. Each intervention was carefully designed to create maximum uncertainty with minimal direct intervention. A communication hub near Jupiter suddenly went dark. A defensive platform in the asteroid belt began broadcasting signals that made no logical sense. Battleships received orders that contradicted their most basic operational protocols. The final assault was not a moment of destruction, but a moment of fundamental transformation. Humanity was rewriting the very rules of technological interaction. "We are becoming something new," Elena told Marcus, watching the global communication map that showed resistance interventions lighting up like neural connections in a living brain. The Zorn had believed their technological superiority made them invincible. Now they were learning the most important lesson about intelligence. True strength lies not in perfect control, but in the ability to adapt to the unexpected. Silence descended across the solar system. The last Zorn communication networks flickered and died, not with a violent explosion, but with a whimper of computational confusion. In the underground Andes complex, Dr. Elena Rodriguez and General Marcus Chen watched the final moments of the invasion unfold with a mixture of exhaustion and profound realization. The defeat of the Zorn Collective was unlike any military victory in human history. They had not been conquered through conventional warfare, but through a fundamental reimagining of technological interaction. The global resistance had done more than defend humanity. They had introduced a new paradigm of understanding intelligence, communication, and survival. "We didn't just fight," Elena said quietly, studying the final data streams. "We demonstrated something fundamental about intelligence itself." The resistance cells around the world began to communicate, sharing the first moments of their unexpected victory. From a research station in rural Japan to a makeshift communication center in Brazil, human teams realized they had achieved something beyond mere survival. Dr. Keiko Nakamura, analyzing the final quantum communication patterns, made a crucial observation. They couldn't comprehend genuine uncertainty, she explained during an initial debrief. Their entire technological ecosystem was built on the assumption of perfect predictability. We introduced something they could not mathematically account for: true adaptive intelligence. The global nature of the resistance became its most significant legacy. This was not a victory achieved by a single nation or research team. It was a collaborative effort that transcended traditional boundaries. Scientists, engineers, mathematicians, and strategic thinkers from every continent had contributed to humanity's survival. Marcus studied the strategic implications. "We transformed warfare," he noted, "not through superior firepower, but by challenging the fundamental assumptions of technological interaction." The aftermath revealed the true depth of human innovation. Each resistance cell had developed unique approaches that, when combined, created a global adaptive network. The Brazilian team's signal mimicry, the Japanese quantum manipulation experts, the Nairobi mathematical strategists. Each group had contributed a crucial piece of a complex puzzle. Sarah, the young engineer who had been instrumental in developing the initial quantum interference algorithms, realized the profound implications of their victory. "We didn't just defend ourselves," she said. "We created an entirely new understanding of collective intelligence." Research began to reveal the full extent of their technological breakthrough. The quantum interference algorithms developed during the invasion represented a fundamental leap in understanding communication, adaptation, and technological interaction. Universities around the world began studying the resistance's approaches, recognizing that this was more than a military victory. Elena's team started compiling the comprehensive report of the invasion and resistance. It was more than a historical document. It was a blueprint for a new understanding of intelligence, human, technological, and beyond. We showed that true intelligence is not about perfect prediction, Elena explained during a global conference. It's about the ability to adapt, to find solutions in uncertainty, to create possibility where others see only limitation. The solar system began to heal. Destroyed infrastructure would be rebuilt. Lost colonies would be reestablished. But something fundamental had changed. Humanity had proven itself to be something more than just another technological civilization. Marcus reflected on the deeper implications. The Zorn had viewed humans as a primitive species, worthy only of elimination. Instead, they had encountered an intelligence that defied their most fundamental understanding. A species that could transform uncertainty into strength. Global communication networks, once destroyed, began to rebuild themselves. But they were different now. More adaptive, more resilient, inspired by the very strategies that had defeated the Zorn invasion. Dr. Robert Martinez, the complexity theory specialist, summarized the transformation best. "We didn't just survive," he said. "We demonstrated that intelligence is not about control. It's about adaptation, about finding potential in the spaces between certainty." As the first reports of reconstruction began to spread, humanity looked to the stars with a new understanding. They were no longer just another species waiting to be discovered or conquered. They were something entirely new, a civilization that could transform uncertainty into its greatest strength.